Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Corey with Full House MMA. I wanted to talk about the biggest star in the sport. This guy behind me on this television right here, the notorious one, Conor McGregor. Wait, Corey. No. This guy's won like one fight in the last 4 years. How are you going to say he's the biggest star in the sport? He's the biggest star in the sport. Trust me. Wait, Corey, his leg's broken, man. He hasn't fought in a year, Lost to Poirier twice, lost to Khabib. I mean, only guy he's beat in the last 5 years has been Donald Cerrone. How are you going to say he's the biggest star in the sport? Come on, guys. He is the biggest star in the sport. And as far as name value, Conor McGregor is up there with names like Michael Jordan for basketball, Tom Brady for football, Tiger Woods for golf. I mean, that literally is the kind of global name recognition that Conor McGregor has. So undoubtedly, until the world changes that, and until we stop talking about him on a daily basis like he's still around, the world is going to ask for him to still be around. And if the world wants him around, then the UFC wants him around. Because if there's one thing that the UFC has shown is that if it makes dollars, it makes sense. And so if they're looking at Conor and he is the biggest cash cow that they have ever had in their industry and in that business, then they are going to try to find any way possible to get Conor back into the mix, to get him back fighting again so he can sell those huge, massive pay-per-view numbers, okay? So there's a few guys I want to talk about first and foremost that we can rule out as a possibility for Conor coming back. Oh, you know what? Let me back up. I want to say a couple more things. So if you follow Conor on Instagram, if you follow him on any other social media platform, you know that he's living life large. He's living good, man, and he is really buckling down on his business endeavors like the Black Forge Inn, the Proper 12 whiskey. He has built literally a McGregor empire of cash flow with these business endeavors that he's has his hand in, and that's very, very smart. These fighters have a finite amount of time that they're able to get into that cage and fight at the highest, most elite level, and at some point that's going to have to end. At some point it does end for everyone, but I don't think we're there yet with Conor McGregor, and I find it interesting because he gets beat by Khabib, he loses a couple of fights to Poirier, and now all of a sudden Conor's washed up. What? What are you talking about? Washed up? He loses to the possible GOAT, the greatest of all time in Khabib, who's undefeated, 29-0, retired 29-0, and Conor, gave him more of a challenge than just about any other fight he had ever had inside the octagon. And Poirier is the number one guy in that division and only sits behind Charles Oliveira in terms of being the best in the world in terms of lightweight. You got Gaethje up in there, but then Poirier beat Gaethje as well. So you can only put one person in front of him, and that's Oliveira. So at best, Conor's losses that people claim made him washed up have been to the very best in the world and then the number two guy in the world. Really? That hardly qualifies as washed up, okay? So I think a lot of people just love to hate Conor, and I understand with that enigmatic personality that he has. He has a very dynamic, polarizing sort of persona, and a lot of people just love to hate that guy, and I think that's a lot of what we're experiencing when people say that. Oh, he's washed up. Now, undoubtedly, he's had his hand in a lot of different cookie jars in terms of his businesses and setting up generational wealth for his family and things like that. That has certainly caused him to have to divide his time into other places outside of fighting, and I think we all can agree that certainly has played a part in Conor's performance when he gets back into the octagon. And it's one of those things we all know that you don't get better at something by not doing it, right? and he gets put in there with a killer like Dustin Poirier, who never missed a beat and has never taken a day off. And then we want to say Conor's washed up. He's hardly washed up, guys. And I'll tell you this right now, for the UFC, if it makes dollars, it makes sense. And it makes sense for them to try to get Conor back into the fold and get him back to his money-making ways for the UFC. So one thing they're not going to do, in my opinion, whether it's lightweight or if it's welterweight, they're not going to put him back up against Poirier again. I think they realized the error of their ways with that, and you can't take somebody who's been out as long as Conor has and put them in there with a killer like Dustin Poirier, who's been working and working and grinding every day. Conor's just not going to be ready for that. And I think by the time that third fight came around and he broke his leg and all of that played out the way it did, I think the UFC has probably understood that's not the best approach to take with him now. Same thing with Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is a bigger guy, he's a taller guy. He also has that grappling element that he could possibly incorporate into the fight if he chose to do so and chose to really go after that win over Conor if they were to fight. So I don't think it's going to be Nate. And further than that, Nate's on his way out the door as far as the UFC goes anyway. I don't think he's re-signing a contract. There's a lot of information strongly hinting that he might be going to doing some sort of boxing match with Jake Paul for a bunch of money and things like that. So I would not expect Nate to hang around. So the last thing the UFC wants to do is send Nate Diaz out the door with a win over Conor McGregor and then still be trying to use Conor McGregor to sell those huge pay-per-view buys. So they're going to want to get Conor back in here and get him up against somebody that he can beat, or that they feel pretty comfortable that he can beat. That's very important for his first fight back. Now, I know you've got Chandler right there in the top of the mix somewhere. Don't think they're going to do Chandler either, because here we are in a situation where Chandler is one of those guys that he will stand up and have a bang out war with someone and throw hands, and he's proven that he understands conceptually that this is what the fans want to see. But if Chandler gets in there and really starts realizing the magnitude of the situation and that he has the chance to not only make a whole bunch of money, but to put on his record that he has beat the great Conor McGregor, then Chandler might get a wild hair up his ass and decide to grapple and wrestle. And we all know that Chandler has the accolades and the wrestling accolades to probably do a number on Conor. So I think as far as the UFC is concerned, that's probably not a safe bet for them either, because there's a chance that Conor could lose to Chandler. So, and then of course there's Gaethje. He's about to have the fight with Oliveira, so he's too far up there in the ranks and in the totem pole to be Conor's first fight back. And again, Gaethje has been very active, has never missed a beat. So they're not going to want to, I think they've learned the error of their ways about putting him in there with someone who is at the very top of the heap like that, because they cannot have Conor losing 3 fights in a row. He's already dropped 2 to Poirier, and now here we have him. If he comes back for a third fight, they're not going to put him in there against a killer like Gaethje. There's one guy who I think is a good possibility for the UFC to put Conor in there with. And his name is none other than El Cucuy, Tony Ferguson. Now, Tony has that name value. He certainly has the name recognition to warrant a fight like Conor McGregor. People are going to watch just because Conor's in there, okay? But, they can't put someone who's as huge as Conor in there with a no-name guy. You just can't do it. It's not going to work. The public is going to demand more, but because of the name value of Conor. So they're going to have to get him in there with someone who also has a little bit of rub on their name. Tony Ferguson has that. He's been in there with some of the greats. He's been in there with some of the killers. But he's also kind of on a losing streak. He's lost a few recently, just as Conor has, okay? So you got that as well. You got other guys there in the top, Dariush and, Islam, some of those guys, they're not going to want to take a chance on sticking Conor in there with those guys and then him losing to them. Dariush doesn't have the name value. Islam is getting to where he really quickly that he has the name value. And there's a story there, of course, with him being the disciple of Khabib and all that. They don't want to put Conor in there and feed him to Islam and then he loses. And that's probably what would happen. You saw what Khabib did to Conor, and it wouldn't be much of a different story with Islam, I imagine. So therefore, they're not going to put him in there with him. That leaves one guy that makes sense, Tony Ferguson. Tony's a guy who gets hit. Also, this is something that people praised him for back in the day. Oh, he can take so much punishment, this and that and the other. I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, but it does speak to how tough Tony is. And with that, Tony loves to provide, action-packed, exciting fights as well. I would be very shocked if in a fight with Conor, if he actually went in and tried to grapple him and stuff like that. Tony's going to want to stay up on the feet, making an exciting match. That's the kind of fight that he's going to be looking for. And plus, he's not the kind of guy that's, such a good wrestler and grappler that he's probably going to be able to take Conor down. Conor has pretty good takedown defense when you really add it all up. He's not a grappler per se, and he would obviously prefer to play to his strengths and stay up on his feet and strike, but he is known to have some pretty good wrestling defense. And Tony's, not the most top-notch wrestler in the division by far, so I think Tony would stay away from that. He would actually stand up with Conor. And I also feel like the UFC is probably getting close to the end of their road with Tony. I'm not sure how many fights he has left on his contract, but they're getting close to the end of the road with Tony, and I see him being kind of on his way out the door of the UFC, and they're trying to bring Conor on his way back in to get a few more really good years out of him while he's still young enough to do his thing, while he still has that significant name value and they can earn all those huge pay-per-view buys off of him. So they feel like, I believe, the UFC that is, they feel like Conor could probably get a win over Tony. Not nearly as risky as putting him up against some of these other guys. So that's what I think. What makes the most sense for the UFC right now and for all parties involved is to get Conor back in there with somebody like Tony Ferguson. Tony's a legend, so that kind of puts him right back in the swing of things, just like it did when he beat Cowboy Cerrone. That would be the equivalent to that sort of move. They're not going to put him back in there with a killer like Poirier. Probably not going to be Nate Diaz either. Would love to know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below. Let me know who you think, if Conor does come back and he doesn't ride off into the sunset with all of his millions. If he comes back to the cage, who do you think would be his first fight back, and what would make the most sense as far as you're concerned? I'd love to know. Leave the comment down below. I do look at the comments and I will respond to the comments. Other than that, thanks for watching the channel, Full House MMA, and like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Thanks for listening, guys.